Alrighty, let's get this party started. How are you guys doing? Hold on, I got some audio issues right now in my ear. Also, some hair issues. How are you guys doing? It is Sunday, December 19th, 2 p.m. Eastern, as usual. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Sunday, I almost said Sunday night. Just Sunday. It's been good for me overall. It's Christmas week already, pretty crazy. Hope you guys have some good plans ahead of you for this week. I'm just going to have my family coming into town. I think I still should be streaming next week. I think my parents are going to be leaving early enough to where I will be able to. But I'll keep you guys posted. Not 100% sure yet. All right. Just 1 second. All right, so don't have a whole lot to talk about today. Not a usual slate of ideas that's on my mind. First thing, did you guys see the Jake Paul knockout last night? Jesus. What an interesting world that we live in where we have former UFC professionals fighting YouTubers. A kid that was from the Disney Channel. And not only, let me turn this audio down. Might be a little bit too loud. I'll go ahead and just show it real quick, though, in case you didn't see it. I don't care if this gets taken down, whatever. I mean, bro. I was speechless after that. That was a very uneventful few rounds leading up to that, but my God. What's crazy is hearing all these people on social media after the fact trying to say that that was staged. Guys, I don't think you know what you're watching. That might have been a lot of things. That might have been embarrassing for Woodley. That might have been a crazy thing to see. But man, that was not a setup. That was not rigged. This was a very real fight. And I don't think people like, who's going to volunteer to take a hit like that with everything we know now about brain damage, everything that we know about concussions? There was that the tight end during the Thursday night game, I think it was, that got knocked out just by this weird freak fall that he took. He didn't even get hit. He just fell. And I mean, he did that. He stiffened up. He's laying on the ground. I mean, it was an awful sight. But I feel like we're just now really starting to understand what can happen as a result of brain injuries. And we're really just at the tip of the iceberg, I think. We're well aware of it, and we're more, conscious of it than ever. I think the NFL takes a lot of precautions. Any contact sport really takes a lot more precautions around this stuff. But man, it's only going to get worse, I think, in the future in terms of like Today an NFL player might get hit in the head, and we're like, okay, he needs to take the next week off. Who's to say 5 years from now we're not like, oh my God, you let that guy go out after just a week of rest? Like, that guy should have had 6 months minimum. It wouldn't surprise me if we get to that point. So even though we're not all the way there, I think the idea that a seasoned veteran in a combat sport is going to just willingly take a shot to the head is quite possibly one of the dumbest things ever, especially like that. There have been some fights where I'm like, okay, that might have been rigged, but they don't end like that. That is not how they end. It's like flat earther shit, man. That's really what it is. It's like the flat earthers of professional sports, really. Shit. I just spilled a lot of water all over my mouse pad. Thankfully, it didn't land on my keyboard. All right. So the other thing I want to talk about, well, really the one thing I actually wanted to talk about before I got distracted by the boxing match last night, is the Joe Rogan Experience with Dr. Peter McCullough. This has been trending on Twitter. I've seen it on social media pretty much every day since the podcast has come out. And I haven't finished it yet, but I've got to say, man, it's worth a listen. And it's worth a listen not only because of what he's saying, but also the fact that they're trying to cover this up as much as they are. I think, let me just verify this real quick. Rogan McCullough. Okay, so some of the clips are still on YouTube, but they're not Rogan's. Yeah, none of those are up. Everything from the McCullough episode is not on Joe Rogan's clip channel. And just so you guys know what I'm looking at, I'm looking at this here, Powerful JRE. He said 4 days ago, 4 days ago, 5 days ago. I think all of these here are after McCullough was on the podcast. And then let me see the other ones that are popping up. 5 days ago, 3 days ago. So there are a couple of clips that are still up. They're probably eventually going to be taken down, I'm guessing. But yeah, I think the ones officially on Joe Rogan's page have been taken down. But when they do stuff like that, whenever they throw all of these disclaimers on Twitter, whenever they take down all these videos on YouTube, that makes people like me even more likely to think that this guy has something legitimate to say. Because I don't know if they're willfully just ignorant to this fact, but if they just talk shit about this interview, I would be like, okay, maybe this guy isn't who we think he is. Maybe he has some biases or some conflicting interests, something. But whenever these clips are just taken down, then I really start to get suspicious. I'm like, why do we not just have a talk about this? Why not present his evidence, present the evidence that proves that wrong, and let people like me decide for ourselves? Very similar to what they did with James Damore. Rather than try to prove the science that he presented as incorrect, rather than saying, hey, this is why this is a misleading study, you took this out of context, rather than saying, this was one experiment of 30 experiments you could have chosen, but you chose this one. Why not these other 30? Rather than do that, they just removed all of his scientific citations entirely. They presented everything else that he said, but anything scientific that he linked to, they just removed that completely. So that makes people like me very skeptical. And this podcast is starting to do it even more. I mean, I'm already in the camp where I don't really care. The only thing that gets in my way as far as vaccination status goes is traveling. Other than that, I has no real effect on my life. Now, I feel for the people that do have to make certain choices, like if your employer is requiring that you do it, or if you work in an industry where you really have no choice, you have to get vaccinated. I feel for those people. But I'm in a position in my life where I can just choose to opt out of it completely. So, really, the only thing that would kind of pressure me into getting the vaccine is a luxury, is the freedom and the ability to travel to another country. Other than that, there's not much that it's getting in the way of. And I don't agree with that. I wish it wasn't the case that I had to get vaccinated in order to travel internationally, of course. But that's the world that we live in. And I think we're hitting this point now with COVID. I mean, it's about to be 2022, right? I don't know that we're ever going to go back to a pre COVID world. And I don't mean that from a mask standpoint. I don't mean that from a vaccination standpoint. I mean that from a like grassroots cultural point of view. The amount of trust that people have in authority figures. I feel like it was already starting when Trump was in office. The whole fake news thing. Obviously, if you were a Democrat, you thought everything he said was evil. You hated the guy. And if you were a little bit more conservative, maybe just a little bit more skeptical, then you started to really question the mainstream media, or as Michael Malice calls it, the corporate media. I forget the term that he uses. But you really started to question some of this stuff, right? Especially with like incidents like I don't even know his real name anymore because Dave Chappelle kind of buried the guy. Juicy Smollett, that whole story, the way the mainstream media covered that. You look at Kyle Rittenhouse, the way the mainstream media covered that. More and more people are starting to get skeptical of the mainstream media. And I think this has taken it to the next level to where people aren't just skeptical of the mainstream media. Now they're just skeptical of authority figures in general. Now, how does this play out in our day-to-day life? I think people are going to begin to try to opt out of the system entirely. I think certain things like it's always going to start in tech. I think that's where it really starts, these types of movements. But I really think you're going to start to see people just opt out of the system entirely, especially if people are going to be forced to send their kids to school with masks on, which isn't just something that's said online. It isn't just something that people are promoting, that there's no truth to it. I saw it the other day. This room that I'm in, there's a window right there. I can see straight out onto my street. The other day around 3 o'clock, I was up here drumming. I see kids coming home. They're getting off the bus, walking home with their parents. Every single parent doesn't have a mask on. Good sign to see because they're outside and it's December 2022. Every single kid getting off of that bus, walking home with a mask on. The longer this kind of stuff starts to continue, the more and more that I think people are going to be like, I don't want my kid in a part of this system. Especially if their teachers are total fucking Karens. They're going to be like, you know what? I'm good. I'm going to go homeschool my kid. We're going to see this kind of stuff take off. Sarah Walker says, Vask Tech. I don't know if you're a bot. I don't know if I'm supposed to know what that means. it's kind of hard to articulate how I think this is going to look, but I think we're almost going to have like this revival from the past where people are going to start to rely more on their communities. And when I say communities, I don't necessarily mean your next door neighbors. It might not be them because your next door neighbor might be a fucking Karen. And every time you walk outside to take out the trash and you don't have a mask on, she's losing her mind. That might exist. I'm not talking about that kind of community. I'm talking about gathering on Facebook, gathering on people in your area that are like-minded and think the way you do, and starting to collaborate a little bit more, because that's what technology provides us. It provides us a way to communicate with the people around us. And up until now, it's primarily been used for social media. It's primarily been used for Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. It's all been like kind of a global scale. But now I think we're going to start hitting these, I don't know if there's actually going to be social networks for it, but just like subgroups on social media where there's going to be like people who are like, hey, I live in this suburb of Atlanta. Does anybody homeschool around here? And people are going to start like pooling people together, pooling families together, and starting to exchange a little bit more. It's starting to do stuff on their own. We already see it in certain forms, right? People are already starting to make these moves. You already see people moving out of the city. They're like, is this the lifestyle I want? COVID in general started to make people rethink how much time they were spending at work. Is this really worth it? Do I actually need to be in the office? I can actually do all of the work I need to do in a fraction of the hours that I'm asked to be in the office. People are starting to rethink this stuff. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people out there that are just quitting jobs because they're like, hey, I'm just going to leech off the system. But there's also a lot of people that are like, hey, I'm going to start to build a different life for myself. I'm going to move out of the city, lower my cost of living, get a different job, work remotely, be able to spend more time at home with my kids, maybe homeschool a couple other kids in the area. This stuff I think is going to start to happen a little bit more. And I'm going to make a prediction here. Since I've made a few predictions on this channel in the past, I'm going to make a prediction here. I think in the future, one, I think this is the start of the private education revolution. This is what's going to finally get people to really look to alternative sources, especially once you start getting critical race theory into schools. Because I'm convinced most adults don't give two fucks about their preferred gender pronoun at work. They just do it to not make noise. They show up, there's like, are you a she, her, they, them, zer? They're like, I don't fucking care, dude. They don't care about this stuff. They might be willing to take that on. They might be willing to say, okay, not the type of world I want to live in, not the kind of stuff I want to see at work, but whatever. I need to put food on the table. I have kids at home. I'll deal with it. But the second your kids, you're like 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kids, come home with homework that's like, write the top 3 reasons why you're a racist. Shit like that, they're going to, nope, calling it. I'm out. And I think you're going to start seeing homeschooling become more popular if it hasn't already. Eventually, some of those people who are homeschooling their kids and maybe other kids might start to get a little bit entrepreneurial, get a little bit more ambitious. Hey, maybe I should start my own school. And they're going to be the ones that are going to start to leverage these online sources, even if they're not from accredited people. Who gives a fuck, really? Do you really need somebody who has a PhD to teach you American history? Or do you just need somebody who's like a super nerd about American history to teach you American history? That's really all you need. And I think we're going to start to see that. And I forgot, I need to go back to my prediction. My prediction is this is what's going to take off. You're going to start to see more and more of these types of communities being brought about. You're going to start to see like grassroots level schools. And what's going to be hilarious is when they start to perform better than public schools. Because I think public schools are going to turn into these dying cities that we're seeing today. These cities where crime is rampant, nothing's a crime. You have people shooting in the street, shitting in the street. Cities are just going to a mess. Not all of them, but like the Portlands, the New York City, I'm guessing. I think I've heard some stuff from there as well. LA, Venice. Like you're going to see that start to happen in public schooling. Parents are going to check out of the system. They're going to start creating their own ways of doing things. They'll probably skip a lot of the bullshit that they teach you in school, start doing real stuff, start finding the great free content that exists on YouTube. Basically, the adults, if they're reasonably intelligent, can really just serve as like content curators. Okay, what's the best math videos online? What are the best algebra videos online? What are the most entertaining history videos online? They'll assign those to the kids, kind of help them along the way, mentor them. And these kids are going to perform better than the kids in public schools who are being taught a bunch of bullshit. And then we're going to start to say that these kids have an unfair advantage. The kids that are in private home schools are going to be the ones that they're going to say have an unfair advantage. Because they're already being pushed up against the wall and they don't know what to do. When Harvard is getting rid of SAT and ACT scores from their admissions to level out the playing field and make the numbers look good, they're no longer in line with their values. Education is no longer the top priority. They're playing a political game. The numbers need to look right. The demographics need to look right. The racial composition needs to look right. The gender composition needs to look right. They're pursuing a very specific goal, and it has nothing to do with results. It has nothing to do with the students that are coming in. They're trying to make things look good optically. The colleges like Harvard are basically doing what professional sports are doing right now. They have all these athletes that'll play an entire game without masks. Then they come off, they do an interview, and they have a mask on. It's like, what the fuck are we doing here? This is doing nothing. You're playing this weird political game, and that's what colleges are starting to do. So you're going to have colleges that are going to be like Harvard that are going to start moving in this direction. Maybe, hopefully, some of them won't. They'll go another direction. But you're going to see more and more of this happen. It wouldn't surprise me if you start to see public schools like lower level, grade schools, high schools, junior high schools start to do the same thing. They're going to be like, oh my God, look at our English scores. Oh my God, look at our math scores. They don't look quite right. Let's change the curriculum so that everybody's performing the same. Meanwhile, you're going to have other schools that are going to say, fuck all of this noise. We're going to go back to what we were originally doing. We don't care about what the demographics say. We don't care about the gender makeup. We don't care about any of that. We care about actually getting results. You guys play your political game. We're going to do this, and they're going to win. Or the government's going to step in the way and try to shut them down. That's where we're going. I don't think this is a phase. The masks might go away. The hand sanitizer might go away. But I truly believe there has been an undoable shift in American culture. Now, if you're pro COVID side to where you literally think everybody should get vaccinated, there are no negative side effects to this, shut up, just take it, get your booster. You're on the other side. You're on the other side that is going to continue to listen to whatever the news tells you, to whatever these big scientists tell you, to whatever the big pharma companies tell you. You're going to continue trusting what they say. Treat all skepticism as, a bunch of QAnon idiots. They'll continue there. But there's another group that's going to say we have to start taking things into our own hands. And whether it's a coincidence, I don't know. But a few years ago, that's kind of what I did. I got tired of working at these tech companies. I got tired of reading online about all the dumb shit that happens in tech companies. I was like, I have to get out of here because I'm not going to be the type of person that hides my Twitter so I don't get fired. I'm like, no, I'm just going to keep talking and try to get myself into a situation to where I'm unfireable. It doesn't matter what I'm saying on Twitter. And I did that. I went freelance, started finding companies that didn't care about what I was saying online, started finding companies where people care, or not only didn't care about what I was saying online, actually agreed with me. You have to find those people. But it took a jump. It took me from working as a contractor at CNN and TBS and saying, fuck this noise. I'm not taking your dumb fucking anti-racism training. I'm doing my own shit. And then I left, started freelancing, started doing that. Now I'm doing my own thing. You have to separate yourself from the system if you think the system is broken. Because at any time, they can end you. At any time, your job, where one of the big benefits is job security, could end. All it takes is a legislator. All it takes is a politician to say, we're going to mandate vaccines. And then now you're sitting there thinking, well, what am I going to do? Break free from the system. If you think all of this is crazy, if you think all of this is right, if you think Dr. Peter McCullough is a fucking kook, if you think the scientists are right, if you think the politicians are right, if you think everything's A-okay, keep on going. But if you're frustrated by this, if you don't like the idea that you might have to get the vaccine in order to travel, if you don't like the idea that one day a politician in your state might be able to force you to wear masks again, didn't that just happen in LA or in California? Didn't they just redo the mask mandate? If you're worried about that, you have to figure out a way to separate yourself from the system. And one of the best ways to do that is from a financial perspective. I'm not saying you have to be a multimillionaire to where you have fuck you money and you can just completely leave the system. Just buy a cabin in Montana and never talk to anybody again. It doesn't have to be like that. But as much as possible, you need to start getting as many of your income sources away from one giant company that will cave to this bullshit as quickly as possible. It has to be done. I really do believe that. And that's been one of my goals over the past few years. I didn't see COVID coming. That's not why I did it. But now that this has happened, I'm like, well, I'm kind of glad I'm already started, right? I'm glad I've already slowly been moving myself away from this. And now it's like, well, I got to make that full jump. So yeah, that would be my big advice to you. And this is something you should do before you get married, before you get engaged, before you have kids. If you're in your 20s, if you're just out of college, That should be the goal. I'm only 31. I'm not that old. But what I will say is partying, continuing college through your 20s is drastically overrated. I had a level of motivation in my 20s that I did not have right now. I don't know what it was. I'm not saying I'm like unmotivated now, but there was just like something in me where I was like, oh my God, all these startup CEOs, they're 23, they're already billionaires. I felt like a loser. I was like constantly trying to do something. While that fire is there, you can still do it in your 30s, but I feel like right outside of college, you're like super motivated. You're like, I'm out of school, finally making money. That's the time to do it. I promise you, you're never going to look back and be like, man, I should have went to those parties in my 20s. They'll never go away. You're good. But you will look back and think to yourself, I wish I would have gotten myself more financially independent in those years. I started that journey, did kind of okay, but I wish I would have done more. So that's my advice for you. If you don't like the way the world's headed, thankfully we're in America. It's not that bad. It could be worse. We could be in Australia. We could be in some of these European countries. But if you're worried that it could get worse, or if you're just frustrated with the level it's at right now, try as hard as you can to find financial independence because it gives you more freedom than anything else. That's my advice. So let me know what you guys think. If you made it to the end of this video, let me know. How do you think this ends up? Do you think we're in a post-COVID world that's never going away? Do you think this is a temporary bump in the road and it's all of us just freaking out over nothing? Or do you think some of this stuff is here to stay? Do you think there has been this kind of like cultural divide that created two Americas as a result of this? Let me know what you think. Like the video if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. I'll post an update later this week on my channel. Create a little post, let you know if I'm streaming on Sunday, December 26th. I should be though, but just keep a heads up just in case. Anyways, guys, have a wonderful Sunday. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next week.